Today, I want to talk to you about building generative AI applications in Java. Now, for the longest time, when we talked about AI and code, we talked about the Python community, and rightfully so. They have so many tools and frameworks for data science and machine learning. But as we've gotten into this generative AI era, if you will, there is a big difference between being able to build and train and refine these models and being able to consume them. And that's really what I've been up to lately, is being able to consume these large language models within my applications. So what I want to talk about today is just how easy it is to get started with a large language model like OpenAI's GPT-4, being able to consume it from, say, a curl command, because it's just a REST API, being able to use that in just a straight Java program, again, just a REST API. We can make that call in Java or any other language for that matter. But then we'll take a look at maybe one use case today, because as we start to build these real world applications, it's much more than just a REST call, right? We have some challenges that we have to face. And I'll show you a framework that makes this incredibly easy to do, solves a lot of the real problems that you're going to come across. And again, this will be more of a progression. So we'll build a simple curl command to talk to OpenAI's GPT-4. We'll build a simple Java application that talks to the large language model. And then we'll kind of iterate on that. We'll build a little bit more of a real world application where we face a real problem that we need to solve for. So to get started today, you're going to need an OpenAI API key. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can go sign up for one. This doesn't, you can do this for any of the large language models out there that have a REST API that you can consume. Real quick, if you're new around here, my name is Dan Vega. You can find out more about me at danvega.dev. I have a lot of free content on my website. I have a blog. I have a newsletter that you can sign up for free and kind of listen to what I'm rambling about every week. You can find out where I'm speaking. I have some courses. I have a YouTube channel, a whole bunch of free content to consume there. If you're into the AI space, and if you're watching this, you probably are, I also have a general AI newsletter called Bite-Sized AI. This is really a place to kind of talk about all the things I'm learning in the AI space, but kind of keep it condensed. So they're pretty short articles around here. This is a newsletter. You could sign up and you'll get notified when I write something new about it. So with that, what I want to do is start with a simple curl command. We're going to write a simple curl application that talks to OpenAI's GPT-4o. And we'll see that to get started, that's all you really need. It's a REST call, right? All right, so I'm here on the command line in my terminal, and I'm in a folder called AI Java Dev. And all we're going to do is create a new file. We'll call this openai.sh. And I'll go ahead and open this up with IDEA. So let's open openai.sh in IntelliJ IDEA. You can open this up in Visual Studio Code or whatever other editor you want to open it up in. So here we are in this little script. So we are going to say that this is a bin, sure. And what we're going to do is we're just going to echo out that we're calling something. So I'm going to say echo calling OpenAI, right? So now what I need is I need a prompt. So I'm going to set a variable here called prompt. And let's just say, tell me something interesting about Java. So that's going to be our kind of query to the large language model. So now what we're going to do is make a curl request. If you look in the documentation, there's an endpoint there called for the REST API, and that's at api.openai.com/v1 chat completions, right? So let's go ahead and go down to the next line. And then we're just going to pass in some headers here. So I'm going to say the content type is equal to applications/JSON, right? So that's our content type. We are going to set a header for our authorization. So you need an API key to make this work. So I'm going to say this is a bear token, and I have an environment variable. This is OpenAI API key. Now, if you don't have this, you can either set one up. You can export it from, I'm using ZSH, or you can just go ahead and hard code this in here for now, but make sure you don't commit that to Git. Finally, we're going to pass in some data here. So we are going to pass in some JSON. And what this is going to look like is it's going to have a model. So we need to define the model that we're using. In this case, with OpenAI, they have a whole bunch of different models. So we're going to say GPT-4o, right? Yep. So that looks good. And then we're going to go ahead and pass in some messages. And this takes an array here. So we'll go like this. And what we're going to pass in is the role of user. So there are different types of roles you can send, like user, system, assistant, function, etc. And we're going to set this to the user role. And then all we're going to do is set the content to whatever is that prompt that we had there before. So I'm going to say this, let's do that. And then we'll say prompt. Right? And let's go ahead and close this off. So that looks pretty good. There is our, yep, and then we need our ending bracket there. So that looks pretty good. We can go ahead and save that. And now we have a script. So we just need to go ahead and run this script. So let's go ahead and run it from here. And you see it says calling OpenAI, bad substitution. Oops, it looks like I have one too many brackets there. Let's go ahead and rerun that, calling OpenAI. And here is the response from the large language model. Certainly one interesting aspect of Java is its platform independence, WinItG, blah, 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 blah. You can read through that yourself. So that is an example of simply calling OpenAI from the command line. Now, we can improve upon that, right? Like maybe we want to use this in a Java application. How can we call the LLM just through a simple Java application? For that, I'm going to create a new project in here. Let's just call this OpenAI. We're going to use Maven, JDK23. We'll set a group ID and an artifact ID. Now, if you're just creating a simple Java program, you could create a single file and run that. I like to start with a Maven project because ultimately I'm going to need some other dependencies that I need to pull in. But for right now, we won't use any external dependencies. We can just go ahead and create this project. So now in source main Java, I'm going to create a new package. I'll call this dev.danvega. Inside of there, I'll create a new class called application, and we are off and running. So the first thing that I need is a public static void main. So I'll go ahead and create that, and we should be off and running. So the first thing I'll need is an API key. So I'll say API key is equal to, and again, I'm going to get this from an environment variable. You can go ahead and hard code this if you wanted to, but I'll go ahead and get this, and this is the OpenAI API key, right? So now I have an API key. And then what I need is a body. So we're going to send a request similar to the one we did in the curl command. I'm going to paste this in just so we don't have to watch me type this. And there is our request. So similar to last time, we're setting a model. We're passing in some messages. We have a role of user. Tell me an interesting fact about the Spring framework. So now we need to make a call to the LLM. We did this with curl on the command line. In Java, we can use the HTTP client from JDK 11. So let's say HTTP request, yep, dot new builder, so new builder, and then we'll go ahead and set a URI. So that is going to be the same URI that we had before. So URI.create, we'll pass in a string. This will be the api.openai.com/v1/chat completions, right? That looks good. And then we just need to do the same thing we did before. So we're going to set some headers. This header is going to be content type, content, oops. All right, content type, and that is going to be application/JSON. The other header that we're going to set is the authorization. So authorization, and the value of that is going to be bearer plus our API key. So we'll say API key there. And then we are going to send a post request. So HTTP request dot body publishers dot of string. And then we're going to pass the body into there. So that is that body that we built before. And then we'll just say build that. And then I'll get back a variable from that. And we'll call this the request. And if you want to cut down on a little bit of verbosity in Java, you can still just use the var keyword there. So now we have a request. And what we need to do is send that request off. So we need to create a client here. We'll say client is equal to HTTP client.new HTTP client. So we have a client. We need to get the response, which is going to come from client.send. And then we need to pass in the request. And then the HTTP response dot body handlers dot of string. So we're going to get a string result back. All right. So with that, we should have what we need. And then we just want to go ahead and print this out. So I want to say response dot body. All right, and then we'll need to add an exception to this, and we should be good to go. So that is the kind of complete single file Java application to talk to an LLM. We have our API key, we have our body, we set up a request, we have a client, we send that request, and we get this response back, which from the LLM is just going to be a string. We kind of saw that before. So let's see if we can go ahead and run that. And there's our response. So you get a whole bunch of information back. So one of which is the assistant role I talked to you about before. There are different roles. And this is the content. So we're getting the actual string back here that is the answer from the LM. But we also get some other information like, hey, this is what you use when it comes to talking to LLMs. The tokens are the currency of an LLM. So here's how many prompt tokens it took. Here's how many completion. Here was the total. These become important when we start building larger applications. Okay, so that is how we could do it in curl, just using a simple script that we run from the command line. This is how we can do it in Java. Again, a pretty simple script to just make a call out to a REST API and get a response back. Now what I want to talk to you about is that's fun for kind of playing around and testing some things out. But when we start to build these real world applications, we are going to have a lot more problems to solve for. And you could kind of roll your own and kind of solve for all these problems as they come up, but there are a lot of things that you're going to have to solve for. So I'm just going to mention one today, and we'll take a look at an example of how something like Spring AI helps us solve for that problem. But what if you wanted a response back from an LLM and you wanted to convert that into a type? So what if we are building a book recommendation engine and we ask the LLM for a book recommendation on AI and coding? We don't really know what the response is going to be. It could give us like a title. It could give us a summary. We have no idea what it's going to generate. But what I want to do is say, here are the things that I care about in a book recommendation system. These are the fields I care about. And whenever I ask you a question about this, I want you to turn that response into a type. That is something we're going to do in almost every application we build, right? So I'm going to show you how easy that is to do in Spring AI. Okay, to kick off a new Spring project, you can head over to start.spring.io. You fill in some metadata. I'm using Java and Maven and the latest version of Spring Boot. And I'm going to fill in some metadata about the project. I'm going to use JDK 23. I'm going to add just a couple dependencies. I'm building a web application, so I'm bringing in the web stack. And I'm also going to include OpenAI. This is Spring AI's support for all the different large language models out there. And in this case, I want to talk directly to OpenAI. So with that, that's all I need. I can go ahead and click this generate button. It will download a zip file. You can open it up in whatever text editor or IDE you're most productive in. I'm going to use IntelliJ's Ultimate Edition. And with that, let's write some code. All right, so the first thing you need to do is configure some properties to kind of tell it which large language model you're talking to. So in this case, I'm going to say OpenAI's API key. Again, this is in an environment variable for me, so I'm going to use that. You can go ahead and hard code this in here, but again, don't check that into Git if that's the case. So I'm going to say OpenAI API key, and then I'm going to set the model. So I want to be specific on which model I'm using. So I'll say OpenAI chat options model, and we'll say GPT-4o. That's all I need to get started. Now we can go ahead and create a controller, and this is going to accept requests and return responses. I'll say this book controller. We'll mark this as a REST controller, and then I will create a get mapping for the root. So when we call the root, this is what is going to get executed. This is going to return a string, and we'll do that in just a second. So now what I need is a way to talk to the LLM. Spring AI provides a chat client, so I can say private final chat client, and we can get this through constructor injection. So we'll do that, and we get this through a builder, and we can say builder, and we can say builder.build, and now we have a chat client to work with. So what we will do is return the chat clients .prompt .user, and here's where we want to figure out exactly what we want to say to the LM here. So let's say generate a book recommendation for a book on AI and coding. So that seems like a good start. Then what we'll do is we'll call out to that LLM, and then what we'll get back is just the string content. So remember when we made that call, whether it was in curl or in Java, we got all that metadata about the response. We just want whatever that actual string representation was. So let me fix my spelling mistake. And with that, we should be able to run our application. So if I go ahead and run this, it is up and running. Now I can send a request into my book controller. So again, we have a get mapping here. So I'm basically making a call to localhost 8080 / and that is the root. I'm using something called HTTP. This is kind of like curl, but a little bit easier to read. So if I just make a call to that, we should get a book recommendation for a book on AI and coding. But here's the thing we're going to see. We're just going to get some text back. I highly recommend a book for those interested in AI and coding is Artificial Intelligence, A Guide to Intelligent Systems by Michael. I'm not even going to try that. So you can see this is just kind of a summary of what it is. And this works, but what if I had very specific requirements of what I wanted back from this response? Let's talk about that. So let's go ahead and create a new Java record. We're going to call this a book recommendation, and this is going to be a record. And what I want back is I want a title, I want an author, I want a publication year, I want a genre, I want a page count if possible, and then I want a summary, right? So now I'm more specific with what I want back, but how does Spring AI help me with this? Well, first off, I want to just kind of change the my prompt here to just be a little bit more specific, and I want to say, please limit the summary to 100 words, right? Maybe I don't want a huge summary of the book. But now, instead of getting the string response back, what I can do is I can say, hey, I want to turn this into an entity. And that entity is that book recommendation record that I created before, right? So now what I'm going to get back is a book recommendation and not a string. And this is incredibly powerful because we're not being specific to the LM. We are not saying, hey, these are the fields that you need to supply back to us, and we want it in JSON format. What happens is Spring looks at that type underneath the hood and sends that as part of the context to the LLM. So it knows exactly what information it has to return. So it's doing that work for us. So this will work with any type, right? We can create our own types. We can do like a list of book recommendations if we wanted more than one. This is just incredibly easy to do. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun this. And then I'll go back to my terminal. We'll make that same request and let's see what we get back this time. So now you see we get an object back. Here's the author, here's the genre, page count, publication year, a summary, and then here's the title, Hands-on Machine Learning with these individuals. So wow, that to me is just so cool. And again, if you do this in Java, you have to do a bunch of things manually to make this work every single time. In this case, you can just say, hey, this is the entity I want to parse it to. And now we have a book recommendation class to work with in our applications. Because most of the time, we're going to be working with types. We're not working with these raw strings that we have no idea of what the LLM is going to send back. All right, so that's it. That's all I got for today. Again, getting started with generative AI in Java couldn't be easier. We took a look at an example of making a call to a REST API from curl, from a simple Java application. But as we start to build some of these real world applications, some problems are going to come up, the things that we need to solve for. This was one of them. There are many, many more. If you want to learn about these, you check out some of my previous videos on Spring AI and AI in general. I talk a lot about these and hopefully you find them useful. If you do, friends, you know what time it is. Please do me a big favor. Leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.